All right, guys, Sam here with you on Tuesday, November 27th here. We're middle of the day, and as it's a Tuesday, we're looking at traditional assets here, so we poll our members. Let them pick these, and first up by request is a look at Apple. Now, I've got the weekly chart up here on Apple. This is the account I'm working with as my primary account. Now, there are some alternates that might be worth considering here. So when you've got a move like this, you really do have to evaluate it on the long term to get some perspective. So I think the real question here is, are we in a third or was that the top? Well, you kind of have to work backwards on this. So if you bring this all the way back here to the early days, so I'm going all the way back to, what have I got here, 82, 83. Right, so we can't just ignore these. So this sure does look like you've got a nice clean 5 here, right? There's your 5. So it's a leading diagonal, and then right. So you have to kind of look at these and go, okay, well there was the ABC when Apple was at 47 cents. Hard to believe, right? And then boom. So if that's 1, 2, what do you do with that? Kind of tricky to do, and then this, right? So it looks to me like you have to go this way. So you have to go 1, 2, this 3, 4, and then extension in the 5th. It's really hard to count that any other way. So you start to put it in perspective. So I think this plays better. So you get this very clear ABC here, right? So this is clearly we're correcting something here, and we come back down to it breaks it, but you've got pretty good technical support here as we come to this prior resistance, right? It always looks different here when you back it up here. So yeah, we get through it, but this looks like a better, so whatever we end up with here, if this is 1, 2, 3, it's a very deep diagonal. It's really a judgment call. So you got to look here and you got to go, okay, if that's 1 and that's 2, well, if this is the 3, it certainly has the distance to be the 3. Now on a weekly, we're not seeing great separation here like we did here in the ABC, but I'm sure down on a daily or something intraday, we could dig out an ABC. So all you can do is say, well, was it technical? Right? So how did that play relative to what came afterwards? Well, we come right to the 50, right? So Vegas wave is right there. We're right to the 50, so we get the classic, right? It doesn't matter, as I've told you guys 100 times. Doesn't matter what the asset is, doesn't matter what the time frame is. So here it is, right? So here's the algo right there, right? So that's likely this is the front run when they took profit there. Here's the reaction. Now it has more legs, right? It doesn't get the absolute turn. Doesn't need to, right? That's Apple from 56 cents to 119. Well, pardon me, not 56 cents. That's from $55 to, if that's the front run, 120. They more than double their money there. Okay, so it looks to me like we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Because, sorry, excuse me, because it can't be. We can't go 3, 4, 5. It doesn't play as well. It looks like we go, and then this is shorter. So if I measure it, show you what at first glance you might think, oh, well, let's see, could that be it? Right. So this swing is longer than this swing. So I think this plays better as a 5 here. So A, B, C down for the 2, and again, take note, I'm on a weekly chart. So if this is 1, 2, well, it means we have to allow for. I got to go all the way back here. I'm kind of eyeball here. It won't matter, right? So it's a shallow 2. Again, the stronger the market, it's not that we don't see it. It's not where you'd look for it statistically. If we're thinking about where wave 2s tend to go, that's a very shallow wave 2. But I think this is the better way to count this. If this is 1 and this is 2, well, here's the biggest move of the whole thing. So that's likely a 3. So even if I haven't yet. Yeah, it's going to have to go this way here. Yeah, I don't think I can get that. I got to get that off the screen. So let's try this. You're not going to be able to see it as well. All right, well, we don't need to worry about that. Okay, so let's just do it this way. Let's think about what the length of that is. So if this is the 1 and this is the 2, right? Where's the highest probability zone for a third, right? We know this well now, between the 1618 and the 175. So I'm much more inclined to call that a third than a 5th. Now, that could be proven to be incorrect in the labeling, depending on how deep we go here. So let's pull that off. So we know we have a contender here. And this framing, so immediately when I see 3 pivots like that, the first thing I want to do is get median lines on it. So I'm going to do a little, I have not done this in advance, so just kind of working through it. Looks like, let's see, are we better here? You know, you've got these two pivots that are side to side. I'm inclined to go with that first pivot here. Here, we better here or here. When in doubt, I'll default to the lower pivot here. This is essentially a double top. So just kind of see that looks like we're framing pretty well here. So then we look at it this way. What's the relationship here? So from here to here, if that's a 1 and this is a 2, well, here's a 2 going exactly where we'd look for it, between the 50 and the 618. Here's our corner pocket, so it's not golden, it's a corner pocket, right? 80%, look where we make the median line, right as we hit the algo target, right? Very common. So if we're not going to pivot, make a hard pivot on the median line, it's very common. Andrew's trading principle number 3, if we don't pivot on the median line, we will hesitate there as the market makes a decision as to whether we're going to go to the opposite parallel as we do here, or whether we're going to come to the lower parallel, which is commonly you'll see it trade as a 1-2. So if we're going 1-2, often you'll see a 1-2 and the 2 will come to the lower parallel. Right, and then you'll have, so we didn't get that, but just so you get the idea, if we had come off of that, and then so here's the 50 at the lower parallel at the Vegas wave, and often that's the setup, so you would get a cleaner 1, 2, 3. So you'd have 1, 2, 3, potentially 4. Now we don't know that the 4 is in, could be going to the lower parallel since we've gone straight through the median line without any hesitation. So note here we go 1, 2. We know that 618 is going to be very close to the negative 100. So all of that suggests that the more likely count here, let me clear up. Well, let's clear this all up. Get that off. Is that this is 3 going into 4. Okay, so this is not relevant here. So now we're looking at if this is the 2 to the 3, well, here's where we got to make a decision. So a retracement in the 4 beyond the 50 starts to reduce the probabilities that we're likely to bounce out of that and then head up to that target. It's just too deep. Now, not that it doesn't happen, not that it couldn't happen. I'm not calling the top an apple. But if we get below that 50, the odds of getting all the way back up here start to be reduced. So it's just statistically, it's lower probability if we break the 50 on the forward. Again, not that it doesn't happen, but you start to think, well, maybe I've got the count wrong here. Maybe we did finish up here and I have to rethink the whole thing. But I'm not ready to go there yet until I see what happens at the 50. So think of just the algo, right? Swing low, swing high, dominant low to dominant high. We know this was technical and got to target, so this is the pivot you'd want to use. I am on a weekly chart. So is there a buy here? Hell yes, there is. Absolutely, that is very, very tradable. So why would you not take that trade, right? Unless you're just convinced that the market is falling and the fangs have peaked and it's all over with here. So going here to the other side of the 618, well, you certainly could. Now that you got to pay attention to what your exposure is. If you're a buyer here, of course, you could do it with options as well. So if we're a buyer at the 50 and you want to be out with a break of the 65, well, that's giving you, if we were going to target, that's 4.25 to 1. That's assuming you want to give it that much room. That would be just, to some degree, you're saying, well, I don't care about the algo count or about the Elliott count. Really, I'm just playing the algo move here. So I've got a dominant swing low to a dominant swing high. Here's the 50, stops at the 65. I'm going to play it just like an algorithm. Well, a big bank can probably absorb that, differently than you and I can, or a hedge fund, right? So we got to think about it and say, well, if I'm a buyer here, can I withstand that? Right, that's 35 points for $35 an apple. Maybe that's not an issue. So that has to factor into how you approach that trade. But it's sure as hell is tradable. So put this right here. Right. So there's no reason not to take that trade here. Now, if we get down here, so here would be your not necessarily invalidation point, but it's certainly hard to call this an ABC. It certainly doesn't look like it's a diagonal structure. And so you think here, well, if this is the 4 and we're in the 5th, we could have an ending diagonal. But it's hard not, again, I'm on the weekly. It's hard not to see this as some sort of 3, 4, 5 going in here. So let's get that. Bear with me a sec here. Let's get this something that would make sense. So hard to see this as anything other than an impulse happening here, right? Particularly given the range. So that sure looks like an impulse, which again makes you think third. So the 4 here at the 50 And listen, we may not make the 50. So given that, so, you know, there's just a couple other things you might look at here. So you've definitely got this here. So you've got trend line support if this is going to come down and start breaking here. A lot of people will draw their pitchforks like this. So you'll get this triangular movement here. So working off of the, let's get it right down here. Right, from our, well, it depends if we use that pivot right there. So let's get that slightly up. There we go. Okay, so you see sort of this funnel effect. Now, again, nothing says we have to go to the 50, but the reason I like this is because I don't have to wonder about what's going to happen here. Now, that doesn't, I'm not saying that the market couldn't come down here, we'd get a little pause and then keep going lower. What I'm saying is the very high probability you're going to have software kick in to buy it because it's just a dominant 50, right? It's particularly on the weekly. So if we go to the daily, we start to look at it and say, what does it look like on the daily? So let's clean some of this up here. All right, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it looks like, certainly looks like it's, I'm going to take some of this off so you can see it. All right, we get that established. We leave those up. So it looks like it can go 1, 2, yeah, let's look in there. Well, you definitely got a nice clean 1, 2. It's a little trickier here. So we got a couple of possibilities here. So it looks like from here you'd go 1, 2, 3. You got a little ABC 4. So you'd have to have a shallow 5, right? Because this looks pretty solid here. Now, what do we do here? So is it ABC? Do we end up with a triangle? Or so so you start to, so your first glance you might think, okay, 1, 2, 3. But this doesn't look much like a 4, does it? All right, so it becomes a question. So let me kill that. So what's the alternative? Well, if we have the possibility that we might have A, B, C, so we'd get more of a triangle in that 4. So you'd have to have an expanded flat. Which, you know, you really have to eliminate all other alternatives before you go to that, because it's, and granted, it's a strong market here, but to get that kind of action in the 4, I'm not sure I love that, right? So if we go, it may be ultimately what we get, right? But so this looks more like just a clean ABC, so it looks a bit more like it's 1, 2. So, but then you got a bit of a problem trying to resolve the finish. So if the 4, let's see, where's my 4 here? So if this 4 is here, and we're going 1, 2, since I've got some sort of an impulse and I've got a very clean ABC. Well, that gets a little problematic. So we see here, so if it was 1, 2, and then we've got the completed impulse here for the 3, that's too far for a 4. So process of elimination, if we've peaked here, and this is the 3rd, if it is the 3rd, how are we counting this? So the only way I can see to count this, to allow for that, to eliminate this as a possibility of a 4 relative to this swing here. So let me put it on here so you can see what I'm struggling with. 1, 2, could that be 3 and 4, and we're going up for 5? So let me get that so you can see it here. Let's go. All right, so if I was trying to count this as 1, 2, I've got my impulse here, but this, you know, relative to this 1, like we gapped through it. So look here. So here's the proposed 1, and we gap through that. All right, a couple of days, we're just gapping through. So it certainly doesn't look like the symmetry would be right for this. For 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Not that it's not possible, but that symmetry is just way off. Right, and even here, so I'm on a daily. This, even if this is corrective, that kind of straight shot down is much more typical of an A wave than a completed correction. So if this is going to do, if we're going to get even something like this, so then you think, okay, A, B, where's that putting the C? Well, am I going to get the same kind of thing that I had here? Right, we saw it in 2017 in crypto all over the place. The market was so insanely strong. The market was too impatient. They wouldn't wait for the C to get below the A. It was just off to the races. So Apple, you think, well, shit, man, that's one hell of a run that it's been on. Could that possibly be the same thing happening there? Well, I don't see another way to resolve it. I think you got to allow for this ABC here because you can't ignore this impulse. And it sure doesn't, it certainly doesn't look like the shape that you'd anticipate in a diagonal, right? So then you think, well, maybe this is ABC. You know, then you're allowing for this very, it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. So you kind of come back here and you say, well, what's left? Well, unless there's something I'm not seeing here, let's put it back together and say, what am I missing? What am I missing here? Do I have the count completely wrong? Well, that's possible, certainly possible. But coming off of this low, if this is the 1, 2, how do I get a 3 here? We know we hit the high probability zone for the 3 to be here. I guess take that up. Let's go up so you can see it better. All right, so if this is 1, 2, 3, how am I getting a 4 here? Well, within this 2, I've got to have an impulse, and I can get a clean impulse until I get to the 5th. So again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The 1, 2 looks solid. The 3 looks solid. Well, let's see. Maybe we've got it wrong here. So let's rethink it. All right. So this, hopefully, the value here is the thought process. Okay. So what's wrong? Something's wrong. It's not fitting. So is it 1, 2? Boy, it's hard to that's hard to think of anything other here than as a 4 for this. So then I come back to going, okay, well, here's my clean, here's a nice motive wave, 1, 2, 3. Here's the trouble spot. See, straight down looks more like an A wave, which makes you think A, B, C. So I keep coming back to that, thinking that looks more like the 4 is here, and we've just got a, oh shit. We've got a little triangle in there, or a flat. So A, B, C. That fits better than to call this a completed correction, and we're starting back up here. I mean, it's just straight down. Again, it's not that it's not possible. Look at it here. So it's just on a different scale. So if we look at this, so this is straight down, and you go, well, shit, where's your ABC? All right, do you have to go 4 hour? Do we see anything there? It looks much more like just an A wave. Now here you've got an ABC. So then that puts you back into the thinking 1, 2, but it doesn't play. It doesn't play as well. So 1, 2, 3. I don't like this as a 4. Now this is very common for us to retrace back to the prior levels 3, 4. So if we're calling that the 3, 4, we're smack dab in the middle of it. But this, no matter how, even if you go down to an hour, how you get an ABC out of that? I just doesn't look like it's there. It looks like best case you got an A wave. So we're correcting on a much larger degree. So this I guess has to go up. Let's go to blue. So could that work? How are you gonna resolve that? So A. That's not a great looking B, but I guess you'd have to go A, B, C, and even that's a little squirrely here. So this has to be A, B, C, A, B, C. Let's look here. One more. Right? This is just, if you're trying to trade this, you're going through this exact same process. If you're approaching it as an Elliott trader would, saying, where's the 4? If it's here, what do I do with this? Problem. So I'm leaning towards the 4 here, even though that's a bit irregular. I don't see a better way to resolve here, allowing for this impulse off of this pivot. This is an impulse. I can't ignore it. So if that's an impulse, what's this? That correcting the whole thing. So that would suggest maybe the top is in. So you kind of got a conundrum here. So of course, first thought is if you're not sure, don't trade it. If you're just an Apple bull, that just doesn't look done, right? I'm down on a 60 minute, so maybe you could make a case here that you got a 1, 2 there. 1, 2, 3. So still doesn't look like it's done. If we're going that way, 1, 2. Well, let's measure it. Right? What tools can we use? If that's the 3, well, we're approaching the 2, 6, 1, 8. So maybe that's your 3, 4, 5. Well, what does that do to the 4? That's putting the 4 even further down here. Because if we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all we've done is complete the A wave, which takes you back to, is that the 3rd or is that the 5th? So let's go all the way back here to where we started. So where are we in the larger count? Let me take some of this stuff off. So get that off of here. So let's open it up again. All right, so do we have a way to create an opportunity to be a buyer here? You know, it could be that this is just the larger degree count is off. So we certainly, this will be the tell. So if we go up here, I'm gonna zoom in and get that just right. So let me, bear with me a sec. Let's get that right on there. So what's the tell? So I guess my first thought is, because of the lack of clarity and this move being so abrupt, I'd wait to see what kind of reaction we get here at the 50. Now, is there a trade there? Yeah, there's a trade there. So again, just so you'd be just tickling the edge of the Vegas wave right there at the 50. You've got some structure here. It's tradable, but as to where we are in the larger degree count, I'm struggling now to call this a 4 right here because of having gone through that subdivision. So this is the tell. So we're at 161, so we're $10 away. If the market's going to stay weak here, we're going to test this 50. I'd be somewhat surprised. Again, I'm back to a weekly. I'd be somewhat surprised if we don't test that 50. Nothing says we have to, but that's a fairly dominant swing. So that's the pivot low of May of 16, right, to our pivot high of September of 18. So pretty long move here. So to come back and test that 50. And so here becomes the problem. So that's very much a trade that's worth taking just off of that. But you got to be conscious of the fact here that we don't have good subdivision here. So is there enough there for you to take that trade off of that 50, off of what we see here? I'll spare you the time. I'm at 21 minutes of trying to come up with an alternate. Maybe I'll do that here on another video here. We'll revisit this. So if we get a reaction at the 50, we'll dig in to do it again. So again, when in doubt, stay out. That's a mantra to live by. If you're not sure, why force a trade here? Again, as a trader, now if you're thinking about long-term investing in Apple, and you can get Apple down here at these levels, 160, 150, maybe that's appealing to you on the longer term. So you're thinking, if you're a longer-term trader, you're not worried about what's going to happen in this wave count. You're thinking, shit, if I can buy Apple under 100, at $160, where's Apple going to be in 5 years? Right, if you're an equity trader, longer term, that may be something to think about. If you're a swing trader, well, you got a little problem here in this first move. The subdivision is not great. And then you might say, well, screw the Elliott. What else can I use? Well, do I have structure here? Do I have anything additionally? And maybe they're working off of a pivot like this. Maybe that's something to pay attention to. Maybe there's a front run here at the 50. There's all sorts of reasons as to why you might put that trade there. But if it doesn't fit with your business, with your trading plan and what you look for, no reason to force a trade. If it doesn't fit, why are you forcing? Right? So if you are going to take that trade, then Elliott count aside, you're not taking it because of an Elliott count. You're taking it because you've got a dominant swing to a dominant pivot to a dominant pivot, and you're approaching a 50 with structure. That's why you're taking it. So if you were taking that, then screw the Elliott count. Forget about the Elliott count. Right? That's not why you're taking the trade. If you're an Elliott trader, I'd be curious to see how you're resolving this as a corrective move, as being complete. I just don't see it. So that's how you have to approach that. Are you a long-term investor? Are you a swing trader? Are you a short-term trader? Maybe a day, maybe a week. What's your time horizon? But I'm sitting here on a daily chart going, I don't see how that's done. Just me, right? So have at it if you see something different. If you've got a count that supports this, I'm not going to take the time to work through an alternate here on the fly, but that may be something to do. If we challenge the 50 here, we'll come back and revisit this. If you've got an alternate count, particularly amongst members who are watching this, I'd be curious to see it. And if you're a YouTuber, skip the hate comments. They get deleted anyway. But feel free to post something constructive. Oh man, it looks to me like we might have this, that kind of thing. Man, I welcome those. You a hate commenter? Delete. Okay, guys, I'll wrap it up there. I'll be back. We're going to look at the NASDAQ as well. Okay, see you in a bit.